Fondation Jean-Jaurès.
Penser pour agir.
Dispute between Serbia and Kosovo flared up to an unprecedentedly dangerous level. Again, once more. Last month, a firefight broke out in northern Kosovo, leaving 4 casualties, 3 Serbian assailants and 1 Kosovo police officer. Shortly after, the Americans drew attention on the fact that a military build-up on the border of Serbia and Kosovo, raising concerns that the situation might just escalate and go out of hands. This doesn't come completely as a surprise. In recent years, the situation has been worsening in this part of the Western Balkans. To discuss the situation on the ground, today I'm receiving Donika Emini, political analyst from Kosovo, member of BiEPAG, the Balkan in Europe Policy Advisory Group. We also just completed a PhD on precisely this topic. And we will discuss the situation on the ground, the geopolitical context, and the concerns around all of these issues. Donika, welcome. Thank you for being here. So, Donika, can you tell us a little bit about the situation on the ground and why these events last month do not come completely as a surprise, but more as an escalation, one more step in this escalation?
Exactly. This is the 3rd time I'm your guest, and every time we talk about the escalation of the situation on the ground, but the situation is different this time because it has escalated to a point in which there was fear of a potential conflict between Kosovo and Serbia. What we saw happening in northern part of Kosovo, it is not surprising, but it is sad to see it happening the same year when the EU had declared that they have moved out of the conflict management cycle in the Kosovo-Serbia dialogue, that they are leading the parties forward to, towards the final deal. And it is happening when the parties had agreed in Brussels and in Ohrid on this, first it was an agreement, then an action plan on how to move forward. This is very, very dangerous because this has been a result of neglection, especially after the war in Ukraine. But sadly, in the meantime, also what is happening between Israel and Palestine, it is something that it is exhausting the sources of the West to deal with potential conflicts. And what is happening in Kosovo is just containment of the status quo, hoping that it's not going to be a conflict, but not a way forward.
And on the ground now, so considering this sequencing of events which have happened in the past month and years, so are we doomed to expect new instability or not?
Yes. I mean, this is not going to stop here. We might have some peaceful months, maybe, but it is going to repeat because what has been seen in the northern part of Kosovo, in Banjska Monastery, was heavy ammunition. It was a well-planned operation. It wasn't just an uprising from the local Serbs. I mean, I wouldn't want to think that local Serbs are, heavy armed to that extent. It was something that was planned. It didn't happen. It happened prematurely. That's why we don't even know how it would have ended up if it had happened when it was planned to happen. So, yes, if we don't take the situation on the ground seriously, if there is not a breakthrough engagement from the EU in the dialogue, then it's very likely that we will repeat the situation. And the situation is not getting better because in Kosovo, the rise of populism, it is there. But in Serbia, they're going to have elections. I mean, they're still not officially announced, but this means that as long as elections are there, Kosovo will still be used as a winning card for which this regime.
To address these issues, so France and also Germany have tried to engage bilaterally and on another track as the dialogue, also trying to support it since 2019, and recently within the framework of the European political community.
Yes.
In Moldova, next month, so before summer, sanctions have been decided as a means to increase pressure
on Kosovo.
So that's a question. Who is the target of these sanctions, and how do you assess the effectivity of these sanctions, and what is missing?
Well, I mean, unfortunately, not just a target of sanctions, but also the weakest link in the dialogue has been always Kosovo. So what the international community now with the EU and the US, sadly, is doing. They're putting pressure on Kurti and Kosovo to accommodate the needs of or requests of an autocrat like Vučić, hoping desperately that this will create satisfaction in Serbia and will make Vučić a Western leader or amidst the war in Ukraine and this Serbian staying on the fence approach. The effects of the sanctions, we can't see them now, but we will see them in the future because there are EPA funds that have been, of course, reserved for Kosovo, but they are put on hold. Sanctions are to the point of even not meeting between the EU ambassador in Kosovo and the Kosovo leaders. They only meet if it's in the case to be discussing about the security situation in the north, but not to discuss about the reforms, not to discuss about the implementation of the SAA. So basically the EU put on hold the entire reform agenda. But on the other hand, is expecting Kosovo to actually comply and implement the reforms on its own. Yes, in Chisinau there was a meeting, and that's, after the meeting, Kosovo had been, there are not sanctions, there are measures, this is how the EU calls them. And this time in Grenada, it was actually an attempt to make Osmani and Vučić meet in the auspices of the EPC meeting. But, of course, Kosovo did not accept the invitation with the sole request that Serbia should be sanctions for what happened in Bajska, because obviously there is a link between the Serbian regime and the Radojčić in the north. But now, at least if Serbia cannot be sanctioned, because there are a lot of Serbian friends like Orban in the EU, Kosovo at least is being asked is asking for the sanctions toward Kosovo to be lifted. This is something we haven't seen so far.
So they have been called indeed to expand the measures to Serbia, but as you say, it's a little bit difficult to have it.
So no, none of that is happening.
There have been, so on the other side, attempt to revive the dialogue and to bring it to some kind of conclusion with a draft, so the statute of association agreements or ruling how the North should be organized. How do you expect this process now to develop? Are we closer to bring it to an end through international intervention, or is it again one more hopes which will just nurture?
Unfortunately, it's the second one. So, as I mentioned intentionally, the elections in Serbia, because that's going to drag feet. But on the other hand, Kosovo is not ready to comply with the pressure that is coming from the EU and the US. It has been an attempt coming from not only EU and US, but also Germany, Italy, and France. Italy, surprisingly, is being also engaged in the dialogue. They were meeting in Pristina, but also in Serbia. But in Pristina, the meeting has been very specific. So the EU has a draft statute of the association and how it's going to look like. But apparently, there was no political will from the Kosovo side to actually accept it. So, given the situation on the ground, but also the fact that, like in Serbia, there is going to be an electoral cycle soon, it is very unlikely that we are going to be able to move forward. And
electoral cycles in the United States, depending on the results of the US, how would it affect the prospect of reaching an agreement if the Republicans would win the elections?
That is a big question mark, because we have memories from the Trump administration and the way that things have moved forward in the process of the dialogue. I do think that we have hoped a lot on Biden's administration, which was completely lukewarm and didn't bring anything new to the Balkans. I'm not sure who is going to run from the Republicans, but it is not going to be easy then, neither for Kosovo nor for Ukraine, and also for transatlantic relations. This is going to be a big question mark, and that's why we constantly say in the Balkans we really have to find a solution before things get worse, because as I said before, there are a lot of conflicts happening around the world and wars, and the West's political capital, but also military capital to deal with Kosovo and the Balkans, which has been considered a chapter that has been closed in the 90s, it is very unlikely to be invested.
Thank you. So it's an issue which is not diminishing, and this is all vanishing. We see the world is coming to brink everywhere, but this one should be under the control of the EU somehow in the hand. It's in the backyard, as we call it, but it's not one which is disappearing. We will continue to talk about it as things evolve. Thank you, Mr. Emini, for sharing.